Constellation training, second weekend, Saturday, part 2. Okay. So, here. So do you feel like you might want to really, you're going to need to sort of, otherwise you see all this, so get as close to the.
Yeah. So this is the lowest.
Okay. That's good enough. Doesn't need to be perfect. Okay. So I'm going to ask you to just let it be. Okay. Need to back.
I need to hold this. That's okay.
No.
Because this won't go lower. So yeah, that's what.
Okay. Okay, so this is Dan Booth Cohen, one of my mentors. He's in Rhode Island now. It's very short.
One of the phenomenon that occurs in constellations that's most challenging is representative perception. So typically we have a group of strangers, or if we're working in individual sessions that I would be representing. In a group we have strangers that are representing, and consistently, and this has been demonstrated tens of thousands of times over the world, over the last 20 years, there have been thousands and thousands of constellations done on all the continents, and the phenomenon of representative perception has been confirmed over and over again. It's uncanny for our cultural mindset, but it happens so often that we have to, at some point, recognize that this is an actual phenomenon that occurs. And what happens is you take a stranger and you just have them stand in stillness and in silence and move their awareness into another person. So it's a bit like a role play, but it's not actually a role play because they're not role playing. They're just moving their awareness as if they were another person. And when they do that, they're actually able to perceive thoughts, feelings, body sensations that are very consistent with the person that they're representing. And very, very often things that they couldn't possibly know or guess at, things that are way out of the blue. They hear a song, they get a sensation in their body, a pain in their leg, or another type of pain, or a fear comes on, or a sentence comes up, and they mouth something that seems completely incongruous, but it's as if the person that they're representing is speaking. And the family member who's presenting the issue will immediately recognize it as having the ring of truth. The biologist Rupert Sheldrake, who has been studying fields of information in biology and then in animal life and then in human life over the past 30 years, has developed a theory called his theory of morphic resonance. And it dovetails with representative perception seamlessly. He's written a number of books. His latest book is called The Science Delusion. He has a book called Dogs That Know When Their Owners Are Coming Home, which basically the dog has an awareness of the behavior of their owners at a distance. And he's worked it out in great detail. He actually has a very large evidence base. And if you take Sheldrake's theory of morphic resonance and you line it up with representative perception, they fit like hand in glove.
That's it on that. So this is an example of talking about some of this stuff. I will let you grab all the technology and take it back. And let you resettle yourself technologically. Okay, so, and part of the reason why I dove into this topic this week is last week and raised a lot of questions about representing and how it works and how you work with it. You two had some really good examples last night of the joys and challenges of working with representatives. And it's always the case, right? Because you have these uncontrollable things called people doing this work, and it requires an underestimated amount of leadership, right? To help representatives represent. And then there's the slightly, that sort of drops out when we're doing one-on-one constellations like you were talking about, Lily. But the issues around representing continue, right? Okay, so the first thing I want to say about representing is that it is 100% a normal human capacity. We're actually doing it all the time, but we don't talk about it this way. We don't notice it a lot of the time. Yeah. I very much appreciate Dan's reference to Rupert Sheldrake and his theory of morphic resonance. He's a biologist, and he's looked at how, plants interact with animals, or, that every organism, everything has a field around it, and those fields are bumping into each other. And there's information being exchanged. And so the example that Dan's offers of the dog knowing that the owner's coming home long before they can actually have any physiological cues. Or the one I always like from my own life is the experience of knowing that car up ahead of you is going to suddenly swerve in front of you before you have anything you've consciously noticed about that car. I think it is a combination of subtle physiological cueing that's unconscious, but when we're talking about real representational perception, obviously there's no cueing going on. They're not looking at the client's dad to get information about the dad, right? Okay. How does it happen? How do you put a card in your pocket and all of a sudden you get this information? Or someone puts your hand on your shoulder and says, "Your mom," and suddenly you're sad, or whatever it might be. First thing I just want to say about this, the capacity of any given person to represent, to be told your dad and to start have the experience or the information coming through, is setting an intention. This is actually a fairly big deal. There's something about setting the intention. We're doing a constellation, and Jeff is going to represent the client's father now. And it sounds stupid, right? But setting that intention or giving the card seems to have completely magical impacts, which is why when you're not clear with the intention, you get messy constellations. Yeah. So when you start moving out of the realm of something as straightforward as father or mother or brother or uncle, the specific people, and things like, I'm going to ask Maria Elena to represent the original suffering in the family. Now that's gotten a little more abstract, right? If you're not kind of like crisp about it, the information that starts coming through is gonna get fuzzier and fuzzier and fuzzier. Yeah? If, for God's sake, you go up to someone and say, I want you to represent, and you think it in your head, and then you're like, no, wait a second, no, wait. No, maybe, you're just setting yourself up for trouble because the intention is unclear. This is why words on cards can be very, very nice. Yeah? Now, unless the words themselves are unclear, in which case you're still in the same spot. So intention plus, in a sense, your leadership. And I'm going to say a whole lot about this. Or guidance. So this is something I really, really learned from watching Bert Hellinger in Mexico City in 2015. So most of us come here from constellation settings that are a tad wordy, right? You go, so what are you experiencing? And they give you a lot of information, and what are you experiencing? And what are you experiencing? Yeah? There's a lot of reporting out. There's a lot of information. And so much so that if I don't check in with someone for a while, people were like, I've got something to say. I've been having 10 experiences from the last time you checked in with me, right? Half of which may end up not being so relevant. Watch Bert and Sophie Hellinger, and they have no reporting out constellations. They're almost entirely silent, okay? And, if I'm mom and you're dad, and we're looking at each other, and then we move closer, or we turn away, or someone sits down, or someone goes like this, stop, just their hand, or a gesture like this, yeah? The whole thing happens with very little guidance and very little reporting out outside of, we all kind of have a sense of what this means, yeah? Or what this means, yeah? And people will say to me, and it was 800 people in a conference, space, and Bert Hellinger never gave a lecture on how to represent. So, and I can't get my representatives to do this. I wish I could. I'm trying to get them to slow down and be quieter and let things unfold a little bit more. But it can't, and I think of this as culture setting, representational culture. Okay? And you are consciously and unconsciously creating that culture with your representatives. They also are bringing in cultures from other constellation lineages. So one of the things I often say at conferences when you are leading a workshop with people who are, God knows what kind of representational culture they've come from, right? And it's a mixed group. One of the things I say is, in your lineage, in your constellation context, people may experience it as completely safe for you to throw chairs. But I'm going to ask you to not do that here today because we're a mixed group with different norms, and let's all kind of respect that we come from different spaces. Yeah. There are constellation environments where screaming and pounding on the floor is just fine. That's not what we do at my constellations. Bert Hellinger would march people out of the room if they tried to do that kind of stuff. But in other spaces, that's okay, yeah? Because it's part of the culture, yeah? So this is what I mean by this. And your representatives are gonna follow this. Again, the conscious and unconscious ways you do this, and in many ways it's gonna be unconscious, the culture that you set, yeah? So, wordy, not wordy, a lot of high intensity emotion, more quiet, dignified process, a little bit of movement, a lot of movement, all this sort of stuff. How free people are to touch each other. I've had to train people no, you cannot go up to a stranger and shove them. I don't care what's going on with your role. You can't do that. right? These kinds of things. Okay, these will shape the intention you set and your own sort of leadership, guidance, conscious and unconscious that sets cultural tone will shape the kind of representing that comes out. This is why, you know, it's back to the conversation of nonlinearity we were having before. Like, it's not like a client comes with an issue and no matter who facilitates it and who shows up to represent, you'd get the same constellation. You won't. You just won't. We influence this stuff. Who shows up to represent will influence these things. Yeah, and we just can't. And how do we argue for the efficacy or some objectivity is the wrong word, but yeah. So this is what makes it tricky, because it's obvious. Like if you represent my mother and you represent my mother, we're going to get two different representations because you're two different people with two different styles of representing. Okay? So this is going to determine what's coming through, the clarity of your intention, so that information about father is coming through strongly, and the culture you set. In terms of representing itself, I like to say there's a dual consciousness. There's the role, father, or whatever it is, yeah? Plus the representative self. You guys had an excellent example last night, and the representative responded so well to it. She was new to me. I don't think she'd done many constellations. She was an excellent representative. And she was going full in. So this was going away. And she was all role. And the thing I've taught you all, I saw her doing it. And I said, just find that inner representing knob. It's set it at 10 right now. Could you set it at a 7? We don't need to recreate the experience. We just need the information. That's a line I got from Francesca Mason Boring, really helpful phrase. Okay. We actually want both of these. This is what makes representing so cool, is that I am experienced father, but I'm also, Leslie, watching father. So this is the kind of sentence that you really want a really good representative to be able to say. You know what? I'm noticing the father, like I'm blaming everybody right now. It's everybody else's fault. Pause. Which makes me wonder if maybe some of it's my fault. Right? That's something you can't do if you're just totally in role. But if you have both available, this is actually part of what makes constellating such an excellent resource, is because we don't just have the father and the limitations of father's consciousness. Which is, there are some lineages where you just kind of dive on in, and then all we've got is the system, which the system needs something new in it, right? It's pace, pace, lead. It's not just pace, pace. We're not living inside the system as it already is. And a good representative can be part of the lead. It's like what you were doing, Katerina, in the opening constellation, when I invited you into the next healing movement. If you had just stuck with the role, you would not have moved into the middle, right? But bringing Katerina in, you saw a movement that the role might actually appreciate. And it's not about forcing, it's not about, acting or making something artificial happen, but it's noticing maybe there's something else that this role wants here that it's willing to try out. This is what often happens if we're in two roles and neither of us are looking at each other, right? Because you don't want to look at each other. And then as the facilitator, I ask you, just look at each other. And then you get to have that discovery of, oh, looking at each other isn't as bad as I thought it would be. but I wouldn't have made that move on my own. There's no way, right?
No.
Or those times when I say, I want you to just say it and then tell me if it lands. Because they wouldn't say it on their own, but then they say it and they go, oh crap, yeah. So we want this, we want both available in our representatives. And this takes some coaching sometimes, especially in our Bay Area where people go, you know, screaming, shouting, and don't we always show our emotions 100%? Isn't that the healthy thing to do? Okay, back to primary and secondary emotions lecture from the first weekend, right? Okay. The other thing I just want to say here, of course, is that reps have their own styles. And you've got to just learn to work with that. I once had a very difficult representative. Someday you'll have a group and you'll have someone who keeps, like, they come every time and they're your most difficult representative. It's a tricky situation to be in. But the only way he experienced a role was in geometry. It was the oddest thing. So it was like, so I need to stand here and I need to be equidistant from these two. And I'm looking over there. And it's important that she's just a little outside of what I'm looking at. He wouldn't report feelings or, you know, and I had to, like, this is so not the way I think. So I really had to appreciate, like, there was something, and it was always geometry. And I knew the Constellation was moving towards a resolution when he was actually starting to have some feelings. Like, oh, we're on to something here now. I had to kind of grok what was going on from his point of view, right? And I had to help the group stay in rapport with it because a lot of people found it very annoying. And I ended up having to change the way I gave people roles, because he would end up in the client role a lot. And the clients would have a really hard time seeing themselves represented that way. And I totally get it. Yeah. There was something, he was an interesting guy. He was probably a bit on the spectrum. But some people are more flamboyant, some people are more wordy. Jeff is always kind of getting just sort of the steady stream of the basic information. I've learned over and over again that I can really trust that if I, like, diminish my own sense of how the information is supposed to come out, right? I mean, this guy, I remember one time he noticed something outside the room that if he hadn't noticed it, I mean, it just changed the whole constellation when I trusted that he was seeing something. And I put in a representative for it and brought it in, and it changed everything, right? So you just need to get comfortable with that. Yeah. Listen to and observe your representatives, how they're standing, how they're breathing, how close they are, who's got their back turned, all that sort of stuff. However, none of this is, we keep coming back, this is great, the theme of the weekend, you know, the non-linearity of the work. The danger of representing is that sometimes it can be so friggin' literal. And the best example I have of this, you know, I mean, when the client says, oh my God, he even has my mother's gestures, you know, that kind of thing, where it gets that literal, yeah? The best one I remember of this was a guy who was trying to decide upon 3 different jobs or vocations. One was web design, one was NLP, and one was Tai Chi. So I just set those 3 up, blind, okay? And the one who turned out to have Tai Chi, it was blind, he didn't know what he was representing, was literally standing there going like, I don't know, but this just feels really good. Like, how literal can you get, right? It is seductive. We need to remember that constellations are fundamentally metaphorical and symbolic. We're in the space of the unconscious. And again, that moment where the client says, that's not like my mother, like the mother shows up as very loving towards the daughter, towards the client. And in real life, the mother was abusive. That's a very hard spot for a client to be in, because it so contradicts their actual experience and the need they have for people to understand she was abused, right? So how do we help the client understand that the underneath, the systemics, the abuse was the way the mother knew how to show the love? Right? Well, we gotta handle that very carefully and very respectfully, yeah? So you need to trust your representatives. At the same time, you maintain a critical stance. There were several moments last night where I was hearing people bring through information, and then I could tell they were layering on their interpretation. So one was, someone wanted to say, something about it, you can't give me what I need, or something like that. And I could tell the representative was queuing up a story about what was coming through that actually wasn't very helpful for the unfolding of things. You need to trust your representatives and the information they're bringing through, but you need a critical stance. And this is the art. You're like, how do you do that? Practice, all that stuff, getting it wrong, taking, the information literally and realizing 20 minutes later, oh, that's not what that meant, okay? Being able to adjust and adapt, be critical with yourself. And again, Francesca Mason-Boring has this wonderful phrase, the field is efficient. And by this, she means it uses everything that enters and is shown in the space. So if you have a representative who's being difficult with you, you've got to deal with it at the literal level. You've got a representative who's not taking your guidance. But there's another level at which I wonder if this challenge with authority is part of the client's system. Right? If the heat kicks out and the room becomes the Arctic, not what you're experiencing right now, but if it gets really cold and everyone's got coats on and whatnot, literally you've got a heating problem in the room that you need to deal with. But at another level, you wonder if it's something relevant to the client system. Okay, so there's a whole lot more to go on this topic. Benefits of representing. There are 3. This is just stuff I like to say to people. Like, why come to a constellation when you're not going to get your own constellation done, right? Which is a big issue. If you're trying to gather groups, you need to have some way to motivate people, right, to come. Well, the first one is it's nice to be in service to others. We just kind of say that, and people are like, oh, you're right. It is nice. It's nice to be in service to others. And frankly, I always say it's kind of cool. There's always a subset of people who just keep showing up because it's kind of cool. I just represented for several years before I'm like, this is cool. This is kind of cool, right? And the final one is you always get your own constellation too when you're representing or even just witnessing. There's always a way in which you've gotten your own constellation as well. So, there's an implicit contract with your representatives. And sometimes you got to get explicit about this, okay? But it is implicit. The first one, the person we are primarily in service to in this group process is the client, not the representative nor the role they represent, right? So if you have a representative, two things can kind of happen. One is that they can kind of get so loyal to the role that they want resolutions for mom or grandma, right? But then we'll be there all night, right? We need something for the client. And that can be a little tricky sometimes because as soon as we step into a role, we feel loyal to them. And that's a useful thing. But again, that's why we want to have this dual consciousness. But also, this doesn't happen as often, but it does happen, which is representatives get something inside of themselves triggered, and then their own needs start to arise, right? And then they start needing you to be in service to them. Now, we want to care for the representatives, right? Do no harm, make sure they're understanding what's going on, be respectful to them, make sure that, like one of the things I said to the woman about the knob was, we don't want you to suffer tonight. You don't need it, and she's like, oh, really, that's great. She just didn't, she had not occurred to her that she didn't need to have the role suffering in herself. Yeah, we don't need you to suffer tonight. She's like, oh, okay, got it, excellent. But people can kind of, there's a certain kind of trauma patterning that gets sticky around negative feelings. And so you feel a little bit of grief and you're like, oh, no, I'm doing, like, it's like a gravity well. Or I'm doing a little bit of anger, or I'm doing a little bit of pain, and I'm in mine. So if we can remember our mission is on behalf of the client, or this is useful to say, different traditions have different words for this person. One is seeker. I like client because client is paying me. But if you're in like a large workshop where everybody paid the same amount, and now you're just choosing from the group, what do you call that person? I mean, I still call them the client of the constellation, but one is client seat. Another one, which is kind of interesting, is question holder. Kind of interesting one. But you'll notice this in the constellations world. There are different names. The person in the, often called the hot seat, I don't like that word, but you will run into it. That this chair is called the hot seat next to. I don't like that word because it frames it very unhelpfully from my point of view. But you're going to run into this language. That this, now that we're in the constellation, this is the focus. Now, one other thing I just want to say, you will also run into the question of who is, even though this is the question holder, who's the actual client of the constellation? Some people will say the family system is the client, and we're in service to the family system. I actually disagree. The family system has not paid for this constellation. However, obviously, the family system is what this person is embedded in. So to the degree it's in service to the client to be in service to the system, because we're systemic thinkers, right? Then yes, we're in service to the system. Yeah? But the person in the chair for me is the client of the constellation. Yeah? This becomes a question of organizational constellations a little bit. Okay. The other thing is also, and I alluded to this, but to be in service to a resolution, not a recreation. Okay. So someone will often do this kind of like, you know, start to like kick like the foot of someone who's on the floor, right? Which is sort of a mild version of recreating the violence. I usually interrupt that sort of stuff, right? Because we're not about recreating. If mom and dad had a conflict, we're not about recreating the conflict, okay? It already happened is what I say to the group. It doesn't need to, we don't need to go through it here again. We do need to know and see and include it, but our goal is resolution, not recreation or reiteration. So because of that, representing is not necessarily about experiencing. Some people really think this is about experiencing and sharing everything. So one thing that's I will find is that someone who I haven't checked in with for a while because they're not the focus of attention will raise their hand and share the exact same thing they shared 10 minutes ago, right? Because they haven't been checked in with for a while, but I already got that information. It really is about finding information in service to resolution. Okay. And this is a discernment process. And there have been times when I've like interrupted a representative because I feel like we're going off into a cul-de-sac of something they're experiencing, but it's not the most important thing. And then I'll realize no, I'm sorry I interrupted you. Actually, you know, so again, I just want to keep saying that you're going to keep adapting, yeah? And I turned that spigot off too fast. Actually, what was it you were going to say before I interrupted you? That sort of thing. Because I'll realize, oh, maybe I did need the information. So it's always kind of a discernment process. Constellations are about including and honoring. But the question is what, right? Not everything. It's what's been excluded and what will be in service to the particular outcome the client mentioned. Yeah? So you really are on the lookout for what is new. You had a great moment, Maria Elena, the other night where you had already gone on the record as with the other representative, I need you to see me. I'm here, I need you to see me. I was kind of surprised given the role, but I was just sort of being present with that for a while. And then maybe about 20 minutes later, finally, because now the two of you were really looking at each other, and I offered you the sentence which worked, which was, before I said, I need you to see me, but I think what I really meant is I need to see you. And then we had something new. The whole room could feel, that actually the you need to see me was it was the present situation already. See me, see me, see me, see me was already included, given the roles. But that one seeing the other one, that had not yet been included. Okay. Now, working with representatives. Love representatives. But it is one of the more challenging parts of this work. Which again, this is implicit in the agreement you have with each other. When you're being a representative, Number one, be a representative. Don't be a facilitator. Okay? Especially when you get in your study groups. This is something I did not mention before, but I've seen study groups get railroaded by this. So Maria Elena goes, I'll be the practice facilitator today. Excellent. Jeff says, I'll be the client. And we've got a few more representatives. Maria Elena gets 5 or 10 minutes in. She doesn't know exactly what to do next, or she's thinking about it, or whatever. And then the other ones start sort of settling, trying to facilitate, right? And this is I bet I was in a study group in a Constellation class where after the first time we met and we sat down and went, okay, one facilitator explicitly, and she or he can ask for help or support from others in the room, but otherwise you have to stay in your lane. Otherwise, what happened last night, the woman who pulled me over, she saw something that she thought would be useful if it were done. And I just kind of had to go, it's okay, thank you, appreciate it, really appreciate it. Because I can't have more than one facilitator in the room. Even if she was right. Like at that point, I'm gonna get distracted if everybody in the room has an opinion about how it's supposed to unfold next, okay? So, so working with representatives can be tricky because, people come with their own channeling background or things that they notice or sensitivity to energy or their ideas about how this is supposed to happen. As I said, representatives can get sideswiped in a couple of ways. I've mentioned this. One is that they get too loyal to the role, and the other one is that they get kind of fascinated with the experience. Somehow or another. They get kind of too into it. And that's, again, that thing about turning it down and having a sense of themselves, of being themselves. This can result in getting caught in secondary emotions. Remember the lecture I gave last weekend about the kind of emotional state where you just keep cycling and it doesn't take us anywhere useful. Going too far in, that's something I've already mentioned. Or focus on self. They lose contact with the group and what the group is up to. That we have a group agreement about what we're up to right here. So how do you manage all this? I've already mentioned some, but the first one is, please don't forget the first thing. The first and the last thing is rapport. Stay in rapport with your representatives. You're not just staying in rapport with your client, you're staying in rapport with the representatives, with the group, and with the roles. So the mother, the father, the grandfather, the SS officer, staying in rapport with them. The woman who sort of pulled me aside, who started telling me what she wanted to do, I got a little annoyed, okay? But I didn't need the group to, I needed the group to stay in rapport with each other in the process, right? So I was really clear about going, thank you, I really appreciate that. But I think I'm gonna ask you to just stay right here. So that the group didn't have to figure out whether it was still okay with itself or not. So it was even being in rapport with the group. Yeah. So rapport number 1. Maintain your appreciation and remember what I just, from again, the first weekend, the pace, lead. That's what I did with that woman. Thank you, I appreciate that. And I think I'm okay. That's the lead, right? That's me not doing the same thing she would have me do, right? And sometimes you kind of got to do this pretty quickly, right? Because I can't like be in a long negotiation with her about this, right? That will snag the group. Okay. Same thing with a representative who's like maybe kicking someone on the floor. You're like, oh, thank you. Oh, hold on. That's actually throwing a little lead first because you got to interrupt the pattern, but then you got to get the rapport back. You know, share with me what is that about if you don't actually kick them, right? Sort of thing. You got to stay in rapport even if you have to direct people. This is something, oh God, I just see it modeled over and over again. So much in constellations, this is the Achilles heel in constellation facilitation. The sort of barking at people, you know, telling people to stop what they're doing. Obviously, you've got to stay in charge. You've got to stay the leader. If you don't stay the leader, you're not up to anything, right? Because they don't have this skill and don't understand this piece. I mean, I've told you the story when I was in southern Germany at the German intensive, and one of the best constellation facilitators in the world. I was just doing what I know how to do, sharing some information. I was not being flamboyant or melodramatic. She just barked at me to shut up. And I went, oh, that's the end of that. I'm done representing for you, my dear. She just lost me, right? And I remember, God, one of the facilitators doing it to a woman who was representing, who's actually 3 times as experienced as he is as a facilitator. And I remember, that's really disrespectful. What are you doing? So, and I'm going to be in the next weekend or the 4th weekend getting into group dynamics and how to manage groups. Staying in rapport with all the elements of what you're up to is key, with your own style, right? Don't try it in a style that is, if you're touchy-feely, be touchy-feely. If you're not, then don't, right? You do it your way. But how you are, stay in rapport with the group and all the elements. Help the representative understand the contract, right? And it might just be a couple of words. The other part of the in here that I didn't see, like group safety, etc. And everything having to do with the integrity of the group goes into that contract as well. But you know, I mean, I told that woman, you know, you're not required to suffer on behalf of the client here. It was a little bit of just teaching, like what we're up to, just a word or two, and it was enough for her. Yeah. Some of the stuff you'll put into your introduction. Jeff, you may have noticed that he did something a little different last night. It just came out of me, and I rather liked it. You were there as well as Maria Elena, but you haven't seen it as much, so you might not have noticed that I did a lot in the beginning around, you know, inviting people into their dignity and their weight, and you know, finding their center and staying in their center and not getting too tempted by drama. I found myself talking about this in a way that I haven't before. And I went, oh, I rather like that. It's teaching, it's setting the tone. What is our contract here? Help them find the intensity knob. I've already mentioned that, you know, that's a really useful, for some people, most people that actually gives them a representation that is automatic. There are a few people who using that kind of a metaphor will not work for, but most people find the internal knob, your representation knob. It's set it at 10 right now, set it at a 7. Everyone, it's really weird. It's like, oh, okay. So it's just like, I mean, that's lunacy. There's no knob inside of you, and it's not notched up to 10. But for some reason, it just they go, oh, okay, and they know how to do it, right? Yeah. Or, you know, someone who's really up there, I say, can you send that down to a 3? Yeah. And they'll just do it. Again, every once in a while, there are people with ways that they think that won't, and you'll have to find something else, okay? Help them move into primary emotions. We talked about some of that last time. And next week, I think we're going to be talking about healing sentences and how they support moving into primary emotions. But I mean, another good example of this was, again, was the sentence I gave you, which is, you know, before I said, I wanted you to see me, but I realized maybe I need to see you. And that moved that role right into something about, well, what was it? Remorse or responsibility or a good kind of guilt a little bit?
It was interesting because it was like stagnation about, I don't know, so many things.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
the
yeah.
responsibility of so many things, like, oh my God, I can't do anything. Yeah.
And it just brought her straight into her dignity. Like, no, no. So we want to get to those kinds of emotions. And as I just said, invite them into their dignity. Discourage play acting, drama, blaming, dismissiveness, all that kind of stuff. Like kicking someone. One of the things you'll often notice me do is if I give someone a sentence, what you did injured me, which is a classic Constellation sentence. And they say it and they go, what you did injured me. I say, no, back up. Can you say that again? Just really simple and with your dignity. No drama. What you did injured me. And we've got a totally different experience. There are some people who think that play acting is part of the job, right? So that, if I say the sentences, I love you, my daughter, they go, I love you, my daughter, right? Or like, whoa. Like, no, it's actually more powerful when you say, I love you, my daughter. And it actually, it's a more honest kind of feeling. So you need to help people with that sometimes. So no play acting. In all of that drama stuff, okay? So people think that will help. They put some spin on it, it'll make it more. A couple of sentences I really like that help get to primary emotions is what's underneath that. And another one is, you've heard me do this a million times, I think, at this point. What does that mean really? So someone will say, I can't be bothered. Now, inside their experience, they just did a full communication. But as the facilitator, you really don't know much, right? Right? So what does that mean, really? And without, by the way, these kinds of little gestures, these dismissive kind of gestures, I really try and ask people not to do those because they're dismissive. They lessen their own dignity and the dignity of other people in the system. So without the gesture, what is that about? What does it mean? I can't be bothered. I've already given so much. Ah, okay. Or, you know, it could be, I never feel really heard or seen. Yeah? Which is so much more useful than I can't be bothered. Right? Now, we don't want to make anyone wrong for this stuff. As I've said, when you step into a role, the first thing you tend to feel are the secondary emotions. For some reason, it's just the way we are. And again, Bert Hellinger's folks were encultured to move straight to primary emotions. If I could do it, I have not figured out the trick yet to enculturate a group of people who've never represented before. And he's also a shaman, and he's doing something and getting everybody in a certain consciousness. I do not have this particular skill set, perhaps yet. So I have to do it more by conscious teaching and leadership. But the more you can move people, appreciate what shows up in the secondary emotions and move them through to the dignified primary emotions, you'll be in greater service to your client, and you'll also be helping yourself because the constellation will move much more efficiently than all that slogging around in the secondary emotions. Okay. And as I said, we're going to get more into healing sentences next weekend.
Quick
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
Is one tool to move people from secondary to primary emotion healing sentences?
Yeah. I just said that we're going to do healing sentences more next weekend. And I've been giving you examples of this because in some way there's no lecture on healing sentences. I can talk about them, but I can't, there's no procedure for coming up with healing sentences. Other than you can feel it when you got one, right? And memorizing the good ones that you hear. Because I have a toolkit of about probably 50 to 100 healing sentences now. And whenever I go to Stefan Hausner or Francesca Mason-Boring and they come out with one, I'm like, if I come out of a 4-day workshop with one new healing sentence I kind of have internalized, then I'm like, I got my money's worth. Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, I was just thinking that if you do no harm to anybody and try to get the dignity of whoever, I mean,
Right.
you can really be wrong, right? With a healing sentence, it will come up, right?
In a sense, there's no way to do no harm. You've all seen me, like, say, I'll give you a really good example from last year's advanced constellations. Someone delivered the sentence because she could see the inner strength of the client and the representative for the client, and that's what she needed to get a hold of. So she was right on the money, the facilitator. How to get there is another question, right? So she delivered this healing sentence to the client's representative. I'm strong. And so doing what I've asked everyone to do, which is to be cooperative with each other, she went, I'm strong. And maybe she believed it 15%, maybe, right? And I could see this, and I think the facilitator saw it too, but she was going for that strength thing, which she knew was there and was important. So I was sort of back and forthing with her. So I said, instead say this sentence, I'm not strong. And then the tears came. She needed to say she was not strong before she could say she was strong. Yeah. So it did no harm that she said, I'm strong. It's in the right direction. But it kind of bulldozed past a lot of weakness that needed to be included and honored first. Yeah. So that's, and you just want to keep listening and paying attention. And when you have really good representatives, they'll let you know it's close, but there's a word out of place. Or they'll just say, I don't know, but that doesn't feel right. Or, yeah. Can everyone feel that? The other one was, it was really an amazing constellation. It really changed everything for the client. And it was a great teaching moment. So the facilitator had, again, the representative for the client say, there's something here I need to speak, which was, again, underlying truth. But I could visibly see, and the representative said it, but I could see him getting upset. And I said, try this one. There's something that needs to be spoken, and it shouldn't be my job. And the tears came. It shouldn't be my job, right? So yeah, so I can even feel the Kundalini sort of coming up as I'm remembering what that system was like, yeah? So it's almost better to have an 80% off healing sentence, because if the representative can help you find the extra 20%, then you're gold. Yeah. But keep looking, because one of the things I often say is that we have this end goal that could be strength of the client, or the truth to be spoken, or belonging to happen again, right? Whatever, sort of the move is going to be, right? And we're over here, the facilitators over here at the beginning or in the middle of the constellation, and we feel this, we feel it's ripe, it can come, it's available, it's true. But there's some big things in here that need to be seen and included first. And if we go straight to this, these will shove this out. And these will feel false, even though they feel true. Like the one, if the representative for the mother shows up as really loving to the client, when the client had the experience of being abused. Okay, so this is a really good example. Mother loved client is the move. It's the end result for the client. When the middle in here is violence, abuse, heartbreak, right? We feel and see the truth of this, but if we plow through this and don't include this, this will pop this out, and the client will leave more convinced that they had an abusive, violent mother, and that their mother did not love them than they did when you walked in. This is why it's constellations and not play acting or family sculpture or therapy in which you instruct someone about how your mother loved you despite the abuse, right? It's the including of all of this in some way. I mean, that's going to vary from system to system to system, right? And you as a facilitator feeling this thing, as you are moving in this direction, and then you feel the system push you back, you'll feel it push you back if you're sensitive to it. Oh, excellent example last night. Oh, such a difficult moment. So at the end, it was going really good. We had the women lined up. The client was against mom and the lineage. It was fabulous. We were ready to end the night. Then I brought in the work, and we had another little problem arise. Damn it, it's 9:30. God damn it. Quarter after. We ended 5 minutes late. It was pretty good last night. And then I brought in a second representative, and the client was not feeling it with you in the role. And then so I brought in another one, and that one was feeling heavy, and I'm like, holy shit, this sucks. And instead of going, one of the things you could have said was I could have followed the client and said, okay, we have bad reps in the roles. Well, reps it happens, I'm going to get to that. Or just find a new rep. And that was kind of her story. Not a bad reps, but not the right rep. Was the story she was having a little bit. And I was just sitting with it. And I'm like, okay, something systemic is showing up here. I need to have a moment. What's going on? And I just sat with it. And I refused to kind of like plow past. So we were at the good moment, you know? Client has work, supported by the mothers. We're there. And something was like pushing me back. Oh no, I worked really hard. It's been a long night. Why can't, you know? I mean, all this stuff, right? But I could feel it pushing me away from the final resolution that was right there. I could feel it. And then what I realized, without going into the mechanics of it, was that part of her, she's a healer person, surrounded by healer type people, and her business having a hard time getting going. And I kept on feeling the mothers and their work, and it felt like it had something to do with them and their work. And I remembered, why have we all become healers and therapists? To heal our families. I'm really sorry to tell you the truth, but that's why we're all here. It's a cliche among psychotherapists, and it's mostly true, which is why somewhere, if you're going to stay a psychotherapist, you've got to refine your motivation once you realize that's what unconsciously is really driving you, and that it doesn't work. And now you have to find a new motivation for remaining a psychotherapist or find a new career. And this is why a lot of psychotherapists sort of, after about 5 or 10 years, say, oh, that's right, I'm not going to heal my family. It turns out I want to be a island biologist instead. Screw all these patients, right? So what I just sort of pointed out to her was, I sort of sat there and I did that little teaching. I literally just sat there and she was like, and I told it in, slightly jokey, there's this cliche about psychotherapists and healers, and she went, yeah. So, and sorry, I'm moving around too much. And then I can't even remember what I ended up doing, but acknowledging the mother's work. And I just had the client say a few sentences about, dear mothers, I have a place in my heart for all that you have suffered and lost, and I leave it with you and ask you to bless my work. Then the work felt much better and wanted to stand next to her. Then I gave her a little bit, I stayed in rapport with her. I did something I rarely do, which was I invited her to make her choice for who she wanted to have represent her work. And I dismissed the people who I had already chosen, which that there's, for some reason, she needs to have agency around this in this moment. Yeah. And it was all fine. And we went to the mother lineage supporting her in her work. We were there. Okay. So this is what I'm saying. You're moving towards this. Everything's great. It's going. I can see it. I can feel it. But something's bouncing me back. If it's not landing, if it's not going there, then there's something you haven't included yet. This is one of those. Haven't included. What have I not included? No? We would all be perfectly happy if everything had been included and honored. It's a little bit of an overstatement, but you know what I'm saying, yeah? Yeah. People could even be happy with, in the face of death, in the face of chronic illness, of 4th stage cancer, if we as a culture were able to include fully these experiences in some way. It doesn't mean there wouldn't be suffering anymore. Yeah. But yeah, a lot of the suffering we know is the way in which we manage and exclude, and we don't grieve and we don't acknowledge. Yeah.
So remembering that situation, the answer seemed to be to allow her to go and choose somebody to do her work.
That was not the answer. It just helped me stay in rapport with her. The answer really was leaving the suffering with the mothers and not recruiting that into the work.
So what was it about having her select somebody?
I could just, it was a rapport thing. I could feel her really needing to, like she got to choose the representative for that role. I could just feel it. She was making up stories about you that were completely inaccurate. I didn't want to collapse to that, but I could also feel her say, I need to be in charge of who represents this for me. I went, okay, no big deal. Yeah. So it was a rapport move.
She actually said that she needs to be in charge, or did you intuit that?
She was giving me this whole story about, maybe it's about the representative, the way he's sitting and holding himself. I mean, you heard a lot of that, right? And I'm like, that's just a story. It's just a story, but it's a very powerful story for her. She didn't say this literally, but she might as well said, he's not the right one to represent this. Right? Right? I knew you were doing a grand job of representing it. Yeah? I trusted you 100%. But I just thought, just be easier. I don't need to force her to agree with me that you're doing fine. And that's probably something to do with her work and her agency around her work and being committed to her work to have chosen her representative for her work. There's something in alignment about that as well, just at the level of the pattern, instead of feeling like it's imposed on her. I mean, that whole thing about instead of having the work facing her and instead having the work standing next to her. Yeah. So a lot of freeing up of independence and agency and adulthood and choice was a big part of what was going on there. Okay. Okay. So a couple of small things before we break for lunch, and we've had a long lecture here, and that went into some non-representation things, but I might put this on the record. It's a great way to describe it. I have never really described it this way before. This is really helpful.
Thank you. Yeah.
And so glad we had an example last night exactly of that. Okay, a couple of other small bits around this. De-rolling, as it is called, getting out of the role. First thing, please presuppose it's easy. You can go in and out of roles. We're not dealing with sneaky energies that will stick to you and they're hard to get off and you'll be sucked into the evil of family systems. And, which is the way some people talk about constellations, which I find extremely unfortunate. Okay? Presuppose stepping in and out of roles is mostly easy. Okay? When you do that, guess what? It's culture setting. People will find it easy. This is why I like doing my final ritual. You haven't seen it yet, but you'll see it later today around my name is, I represented blah, 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 blah. It's just a nice little ritual around I'm now Maria Elena, I'm not your mother, right? And the client says, thank you, right? These little rituals are nice. Sometimes things are quote unquote sticky. And I love, again, Francesca Misambori calls it, one aspect of that can be the grace or gift from that family system to you. Yeah. So in the process, you're getting something. If someone's feeling something sticky, 99 times out of 100, it's something that's time for you to look at. So sorry, it's uncomfortable. Right? So if you represented father and you step out and you can't quite, it's probably something around you and your father, or you and your fatherhood, or you and something, yeah? However, given said that, this is really important. Respect for the client's system means you don't glom onto the client's stuff. You leave it with them. And this was modeled by Carl Buchheit. He had really nice language around this. I don't know if he borrowed it from someone else, and I use it a lot, which is at the end of a constellation, I'll say, notice that small part of what just unfolded that is useful and proper to you, and take that inside your heart. And notice that which is not proper to you, which is most of it, and leave that with the client with respect. It's quite nice. Yeah. Again, it goes back to that thing, instead of making it all about themselves and using the client system to make it about themselves, there's something a little vampire-y about it, right? So it's having respect and leaving it with them. And then the last thing I just want to say, I have a couple of little tips for the rare occasions when someone has gotten themselves really stuck. First of all, just sort of in life, I use this in one-on-one sessions when I'm getting too involved. Let's say I'm working with you and you're dealing with sadness or something, and I'm getting really sad and I'm getting less and less resourceful. There's this little move I do. It's very sophisticated. Are you ready? Me, you, you. Me, you, you. Me, you. It works. It's the weirdest thing. Humor is usually helpful in these things anyway, right? But it like me, you. It's, and you can do that as kind of an internal move if you're sitting with someone and that would be weird. Or if you're outside of the room, you can literally do it. Another one can be, let's say, I was the dead of the Holocaust, which is kind of a heavy thing, yeah? And I feel like it's sticky, and I'm not getting out of it, whatever. What I will do is and the person who's come to me as the facilitator, I'll say, hey, Jeff, let's say I'm the person with the complaint or the difficulty. And Jeff has just finished the constellations. He's, wrapping up, folding chairs, whatever he's doing. And I'll say, Jeff, come on over. Just represent this for a moment. Jeff doesn't even need to know. Okay. So as the facilitator, I just go and I'll just think whatever it is that this person just represented. Okay. So the Holocaust dead in this instance. Okay. Jeff doesn't even need to know what I've just tapped him. Would you be willing to do this? He says, sure. Would you just stand there? He's just going to stand there. And then I'm going to tell the person who's having the trouble, just bow to this. And I might even have the I honor the dignity of your fate or whatever it is. Whatever they were just representing, to bow to it. And they'll go, oh, that feels better. And then I'll go to the Jeff and say, Jeff, step out of that, go fold chairs. You're all done. Thank you. Thanks for helping. Yeah. And I keep it light like that so that Jeff or whoever I ask to do that it doesn't need to become a thing. Yeah. Just, it's really, he doesn't even need to represent it, not really. Just the person needs something to bow to. Right? Okay. That usually takes care of the rest of it. Okay. Exceptionally rare, you do on really rare occasions just attract people in who have poor boundaries, or they have trouble regulating their emotions, or they've got a lot of trauma patterning. They're used to doing a lot of drama. They've gotten sort of rewarded in their life for doing a lot of drama, and there's no sort of intense emotions that they don't get themselves whipped up about. And there's not a ton you can do about that. Yeah, you can have them do the bow. You can let them know things like, it will really respect the client's system if you leave it with them. And if there's something still for you to handle here, then it's yours. Yeah? And then I usually say something, and it should calm down in a few hours. Take care of yourself, take a walk. Bilateral activity, get the hemispheres talking to each other. Go with friends, don't think about this. Drink water, breathe some air. Yeah. But again, don't get sucked into oh, you poor dear. Okay. You try not to do that, okay? Okay. And if you've generally been doing your work, most of the prevention of this sort of stuff is prophylactic. If you've created a culture where people stay in their dignity and weight and in primary emotions, there's going to be very little of this kind of people coming to you afterwards all spun out. Yeah? This is the last topic, the rare rare, like almost never, once every 5 years, taking people out. Because even though you're supposed to trust your representatives and appreciate different styles, you've come to the conclusion that this is an obstacle to moving on. Every once in a while, someone asks to be taken out. What do? Take them out. Exactly. Let them do it. Yeah, doesn't happen very often. I've done it, I think, twice as a representative over the years. Okay. If the representative has gotten themselves so triggered in their trauma stuff, they're not coming out, then take them out for the care of the representative and the care of your process. Looks like this is sort of like gotten really triggering for you. I'm just going to invite you to, you don't have to do this. We'll be okay. So when you have a seat, just return to yourself. Just drink of water in the back. Take care of yourself, okay? Just go ahead and focus on yourself and take care of yourself for the next little bit, okay? And someone's, you guys are smart. When someone is not in charge of themselves anymore and they've gotten themselves too triggered, they cannot be in service to the constellation, and you could be doing something not so nice to the representative, okay? So if the rep won't take direction, is not accepting your leadership, keeps going off in other, I'm really sorry. Thanks so much. I think we need a new person in this role. Okay. There really can only be one facilitator in the room. I come back to this. You got to do it with humility and the ability to be self-critical and adapt and change your mind. Please don't be rigid or mean, but there needs to be one leader in the room. Okay? It doesn't happen very often. And again, when it happens, someone's like sort of, oh, I really, they're being dad, and there's the client and mom, and they're reporting out to you, is directing you to tell them to do something, I think what you ought to have them do. So, thank you so much for that. Really appreciate that. I think I got a different direction we got to go in. I invite you to stay in dad. Okay? That kind of thing. Okay. And then finally, all of this stuff, they're in their own stuff. They asked to be taken out. They're not taking direction. Still see it systemically. In the sense of, boy, it looks like there's a part of the system that's really, really in trauma. Wow, there's a part of the system that can't play well with others and is being too big. Oh, there's a part that had to leave, right? Still see it systemically and reflect that to the group so they don't blame individuals. Never a good energy in your group. Even if an individual is to blame, it's not useful energy for a group. To help them see it and include the person, what happened, even if you need to redirect even quite firmly. Really good example of this. Well, I've told you about this story, I think. Crazy. I've told you before, Ivan Pollock. No, that's not his name. Vlado Ilic. He comes to LA sometimes. He's Serbian. He's not big into boundaries. Very interesting model of constellating. It's just, he sits and he gives rolls and let the chaos begin. This kind of, it was not my style, but it was a great learning experience. on the positive side, he had no censorship in a way that I actually kind of like, okay, he included everything in a way that I found too extreme, but still I really appreciated the stance of it. Anyway, so I ended up in the mother role, and I was being chased by somebody, and it was a huge circle. It was about 40 people, okay? And I was on the outside of the chairs trying to get away from this other representative, and I had made 2 circuits, and the person was still chasing me, and I was in a panic. Talk about secondary emotions. I mean, I was not in my emotions. And I couldn't get there because this person was chasing me, you know? And I couldn't catch up with myself enough to like, So I finally turned to Vlado, and said, Vlado, if you don't intervene here, I'm gonna have to step out of the role. And he says, you do what you need to do. And I said, I'm stepping out of the role. He said, okay. So I did. It wasn't a scene or anything. It was just, that was the level of his trust, was not only whatever happening was happening, but if someone had to step out of a role, then that's what they do. Like follow, he said, I think he said, follow what seems right for you. So I said, and I went and sat down. I was instantly okay, because I believe you can step in and out of roles easily. And then later on, and I was feeling like I'm the friggin' mother. The mother just left the system. I mean, that's usually not good. And the client came up to me later and said, thank you for doing that. That was actually really helpful for me. And I don't know what the story behind why that was helpful, but there was something about that, you know, the mother saying, there's something that's got me too upset here. I need to leave the system. And also, and then the other thing that was really good for me was that what it raised up for me was, so my own constellation, you get your own constellation. I said, I'd never done that before. I'd never had a boundary like that before, because I want to be, generally, we want to be really respectful of facilitators and be cooperative, right? That's an important value. And I realized that I'd probably taken it a little too far against my own body's wisdom sometimes. And we don't need to be assholes when we need to say no, or in some way, yeah. I wasn't a jerk in that scene. I just said, if this doesn't shift, I can't do this anymore. And I sat there and I went, oh, I got to claim my own boundary here. And it felt great. It was just really powerful for me. So all in all, even though that was wacky doodle and not the way I would do constellations, it was still systemic. Yeah. And the client kind of got something she needed with the mother who bowed out of the system. And I got what I needed. It was interesting. So this is the value of being able to see it through these, yeah.
Just curiosity, when you do a constellation with hardly any words and encourage the reps to unfold whatever wants to happen, is there any intentional leadership on the side of the facilitator to come towards the resolution? Or is it more allowing whatever happens and trusting the resolution will happen on its own?
So there's a million answers to that, right? So don't misunderstand what Vlado Illich does and what Bert Hellinger does, completely different. So just in Vlado's case, he kind of lets this crazy thing happen. So people are crying and sobbing and beating on the ground, and all my stuff is going, oh, there are no boundaries, I don't feel safe. And that goes on for about a half hour or so. And then he does a very directed thing between 2 or 3 people that were almost the same every time, which is the other thing that made me a little skeptical about the process. I'm like, we're having the same resolution every time. And that would be the end of it. With Bert Hellinger, he wouldn't put up with that crying and that sobbing and that pounding. Very quiet, very simple movements, very dignified, short, usually 10 to 20 minutes. And by and large, with perhaps a single small intervention, like turning someone around, something like that, the resolutions find their own resolutions. But again, that's part of the culture he creates in the field he's creating through the power of his own shamanic presence, that people can find that. I mean, this was one where like my chakras were all going. So the guy sat down, single word, addiction. He set up the client as himself and someone to represent his father. And for 10 minutes, they looked at each other and slowly, like one step every minute or two, moved towards each other until there was an embrace between father and son. Tears were pouring down my face. I'd never felt anything so powerful in all my life. And like nothing happened and no one did anything. But it was, yeah. No, I don't expect any of us to be able to pull that off. That's partly Bert's, the field he sets around himself. But that was an amazing constellation. That's nothing like a lot of it's like 30 people in the room all sobbing and screaming and
Kind of matches his
completely different.
matches his ethnicity.
Yeah, maybe.
So the Constellation people are very well known for
Drama.
intense amount of drama.
Well, and that's I have a friend who he said a colleague, he was doing constellations in Russia, and he said he actually had to stop doing them because like they'd be chunking along and doing the thing, and then the ground would just drop out. It would just, there's so much trauma.
Yes.
There's so much pain in that field, and it would just drop out, and there would be so much trauma, emotion, like it would just be, and he just couldn't figure out how to work with it.
Yeah.
You kind of have to be a Russian facilitator to work in a really Russian space.
Very close to it.
Yeah. Anyway, so it's 5 after 1. We're having some people show up here at 2:30 for Constellation, so I want to let you guys go. So why don't you have your break? If you could be back in your chairs at 2:30, that would be great. And we'll do a constellation and then we'll do interviews. Okay.